Hey there, if this is your first time stumbling upon my videos, welcome. If you're a return viewer, welcome back. This is another in a series that I've been doing on this particular Sportsman 500. The things that I'm doing apply to many similar models. This happens to be a 1999. Might be some slight differences, location, slight build difference, model difference, but this should at least get you, through what you need to do or where you need to go to find your parts if you have a different model and get you through what we're going to do here. On this one, I'm going to do a couple of things that are commonly overlooked and misunderstood by a lot of people that think it's more complicated than it is. And I think this is probably easier than just changing an oil and filter personally, but just lack of familiarity, people tend to shy away from it and it kind of gets neglected over time. This machine, I don't know if you've seen the oil change video that I did prior. I did a deep dive oil change, took the reservoir off and apart and everything, and as you can see in the video here, if you haven't seen any of my previous videos, I've taken all the plastics off of this and I've done a video on that, as well as a bunch of others, so check that out if you're interested. But on this one, I'm gonna drain the front gear case, for your front wheel drive, four wheel drive, and replace that fluid, and I'm also going to drain the transmission. Some people think it's the rear end, again, just due to lack of familiarity with that. It's actually your transmission. And I'm going to replace that, and I'll talk about the differences of some of the fluids that go in these. They're, just reading up over the years, I've seen a common question on some of that, and I'll hopefully clear some of that up. I guess I could start out with just doing that real quick here. So you have angle drive fluid, demand drive fluid, and those are the two that people ask about a lot. And then the AGL, which is gear case lube or transmission fluid. AGL, that goes in the back. That's for your transmission. I always use the brand there. And of course, if you have a warranty issue and you're doing it yourself, most people with warranty vehicles will take them in. But if you're in a place where that's just not convenient, just to not void your warranty, I would stick with their brand. But if you got something else that works, by all means. Demand drive fluid and angle fluid, those are the two that are commonly mistaken or confused or asked about for clarification. Demand drive is your four-wheel drive. This is for your hubs. And I did a previous video a few years back, actually, on how to change that, and I did a whole bunch of front wheel disassembly and reassembly and then refilling that fluid. And so that's what your demand drive fluid is for. Your angle drive fluid, and I guess a simple way to remember that's for your front gear case. The easy way to remember that is, I guess, your drive shaft's coming down at an angle. So angle drive, I don't know if that's helpful, but to clear those two up. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'll demonstrate real quick where the stuff is on this machine. And again, yours may vary a little bit, but it should get you where you need to go and at least have an understanding. And of course, the amounts that I put in to replenish and the amount that comes out may vary from model to model. On the Sportsman 500s, it's pretty consistent. And when I get to that, I'll go into that in a little more detail. But real quick, I'll just show you where the drain plug is for each and what we're gonna do. So you got, coming around to the back of the machine, I'm sorry. And again, it might look a little weird because the plastics are off, so don't get too disoriented by that. But trailer hitch going underneath here, you got, all these access holes for bolts and stuff and water to drain out and mud, whatever. And if you go up from the back up to here, that's your drain plug for that. A 7/16 fits good on mine. You'll have to check yours out, of course, to do that. And then I'm gonna come around here, and of course, most people have seen that dipstick. And then you come around the front, or around the side there, and then you got your front gear case. And it's really hard. I kind of messed around trying to find the best angle of that. But you can tell because the drive shaft's going in the back, and then you got a drive shaft to each wheel on the side, okay? And I'm gonna go around the front because it's easier for me to show you the plug. And go underneath here, and then again on this one it's like right there towards the front, on your skid plate coming under, boom, there it is. And I don't really see any other bolts that are accessible that you would confuse to be it. And Can't imagine if you did take one of those out that it would be the end of the world for you. So I'm going to drain those real quick if you're interested in seeing that. And rear end, our transmission fluid is usually pink stuff. This stuff kind of has a different consistency and smell to it than kind of like rear end lube does if you've ever changed rear end grease on a vehicle other than a four-wheeler. Trying to get the camera set up, I'm sorry. Alright, get that. And again, this is for me is a 7/16. Doesn't mean yours is. Let's see how much comes out of there. There we go. It's kind of transmission fluidy looking. And it is technically transmission fluid. I drove this around a little bit before I did this just to kind of stir things up. It's always a good idea before you drain out any of your oils to run it and do a few, run around a little bit to get the particulates floating. And this is, again, like when I demonstrated in the oil change, this has a magnetic drain plug tip, and I see some stuff on there, little pieces of crud. So everything seems to be working good. Maybe the previous owner did the old if you can't find them, grind them approach to things, and there might be some stuff in there. I'm going to turn this off for just a second, and then I'll switch around to the front and we'll drain that one. Pro tip, or amateur tip, whatever you want to call it. Real quick, after I shut the camera off, I went and pulled out my dipstick, which I typically do beforehand, and then stuff started flowing out of there really nice. It was kind of pulsing out. Probably a pretty airtight dipstick, and it was, letting out some fluid, letting some air in, letting out some fluid. As soon as I pulled that dipstick out, it started just coming out on a steady stream, and it's almost all drained. So don't forget to pull out your dipstick. That's not a thing on the front, though. There is not a dipstick. You have a drain plug and a fill plug, and that's it. So it's important for you to put in the proper amount up front because you really have no way to check it. In the back you do, but not the front. And I'll switch back, I'll go back up to the front here now and we'll drain that once this one's done dripping, but I won't put you through that. All right, so around the front, I let that back one drip out quite a bit and put the plug back in, and I'll crank them both down once I'm done up here, do them both at the same time. And if you're curious, 14 foot-pounds is what you gotta do. And if you happen to have, see that oil's different in the front end, almost like a peanut butter color. That back stuff is definitely more transmission fluid looking. And when I get to filling these up and I have the book handy, it gives some alternative fluids you can use other than the Polaris stuff if you're so inclined. But I'll let this one drain. Put the plugs back in, 14 foot-pounds on the plugs. For those of you that like to follow that rule. So if you have an inch-pounds torque wrench, you're going to want to do a conversion to make sure, it's a drain plug. That's not nearly as critical. But there are a lot of applications where, proper torques definitely come into play. Years ago, there were issues with vehicles having tires fly off because they weren't tire shops weren't putting proper torque on lug nuts, or over torquing them and stretching, potentially shearing off lug nuts, etc. So you don't want to over torque those. But in case of a drain plug, I think you're probably all right. So I'll let this drain, and then I'll turn the camera back on. I'm going to fill them up, and I'll show you where the fill hole is on this front. The back is obviously the dipstick. That's pretty simple. You're going to need one of those long transmission fluid funnels. I find to be the most advantageous, and it doesn't, make a mess and stuff. You can get that long, thin funnel down through there into the hole and pour in the appropriate amount. And I'll discuss all that here in a minute. I'm just going to let this drain, and then I'll get set up to do that. And by the way, just like on the back, it's good to, the back's got a dipstick, but the front's got your fill plug. This is where you're going to fill it. And of course, you want to remove that. And I'm pretty drained, but I'm just taking it out, obviously, because I got to refill it and see if it helps get any residual oil out of the front there. Thought I'd show you that real quick. Kind of missed that step, but don't forget to do that. And that's where it is, at least on mine. It shouldn't be too much of a mystery to find yours, though, if that's not where yours is. All right, so dipstick's out. I popped my seat off because the funnel fits nicer in there, and I just kind of work it down in there, line it up with the hole. It's a pretty size-on-size fit, and I want to make sure it's in there. And that's pretty good. This machine says 20 ounces, so obviously a quart being 32, and they don't have graduations on here, unfortunately. I think I might actually pour this in like I have a measuring cup for oil. All right, so I got this cup. I used to use this to mix two-stroke oil for my boat years ago. As you can see, this stuff's kind of got a, when it's pouring in the cup, you probably can't see it, but when it first comes out, it looks kind of purple. Try to leave a film on there for you. It's kind of purple. So I'm going to do 20 ounces. Check it with the dipstick, and if it's good, it's good. I've already cranked down the drain plug to 14 foot-pounds. But another note on that is a lot of, this one included, but most machines for drain plugs nowadays have a crush washer on it. And, you know, if you put a new one on, if you're not familiar with that, you just crank it down until you feel it kind of crush or give a little bit, and then resist a little more, if that makes sense. I want to watch this and make sure that it's not leaking out around my funnel connection there. I think we're good. I don't see it leaking out all over the floor. That's good. So 20 ounces, and then I'll check it out. There we go. Yeah, it's got to have time to displace some of that air as it goes in, so I'd pour it slow because it seems to be burping back at me, and if I were to fill the funnel up, it'd probably make a pretty good mess. I don't know if you can hear that, but it's nice and slow. And I think the back end, well, I know it was. I checked it with the dipstick, but at first when it was coming out, because I didn't pull the dipstick out initially when I pulled the drain plug, I was thinking, man, it didn't seem like much came out of there, but it was definitely the appropriate amount, and it was between the lines or at the high end top line on my dipstick. The front, however, there's really no way to check that front. There's no dipstick. There's just a fill plug. So you have to pour in the appropriate amount, and the service manual that I have says 4 ounces. When I talk to guys that work on them all the time in the shop, you know, at a dealership, their recommendation is that they typically do 4 to 6 ounces, and you're good to go. And it's just kind of fill and go. You don't really have a way to monitor that. So if you ever have reason to believe that's leaking or something, the front one, for any reason, it's not a bad idea to drain it and put more in. Again, it's only 4 ounces, and it's, as you saw, it's two plugs, drain plug, fill plug. Pour some in there. It's pretty accessible. I know I have all the plastics off this machine currently, but it's still accessible even with all the plastics on. All right, I'm gonna switch around to the front. Well, I'll check that real quick. Give me a towel here to catch whatever's gonna drip out of this funnel. And then I'm gonna grab a different funnel just so I'm not mixing fluids in the front end. Not that it wouldn't be a crisis, but I'm kind of particular about that kind of stuff. You'll see that pretty good. I'll just kind of finesse around the exhaust here and in. And you want to put it in all the way. Make sure it's seated to get a true measurement. That's when you're checking your... And I could use a little bit more. It looks like, I don't know how well you can see that. It's at the very bottom line, right? Bottom line. You want to be up to the top line, ideally. Or at least in between. So I'm going to add a little bit more. I won't put you through watching that, but you get the gist of it, and then we'll switch around to the front and do that. All right, so of course, wiping off your plug real good before you put it back in. Just try to get any residual drippage, as much as I can control anyways, off there, so it doesn't simulate a leak later after I fill it up and check everything. And again, torquing that down to 14 foot-pounds. And if you're not familiar with a torque wrench, you adjust it by, there's a veneer on there, graduated numbers on there for you to dial it up to the appropriate poundage. And then when you put it on, you'll see it go. I don't know if you heard that, but the handle kind of breaks. Just kind of stops.
You know, and that's telling you that you've reached 14 foot-pounds and time to stop. But I give it a little extra because it's got that crush washer on there. So now we'll fill it up. All right, so I got a different funnel here. This one fits okay. I'm kind of standing in an awkward position. It's kind of shaky doing. Standing like a goof. I may have to hold that one in while I pour, actually. Seems like it's kind of awkward. And I'm bending way over here. It's all kinds of awkward going on. I got a cracked funnel, so I want to make sure I put the crack up, if that makes sense. All right, I'm gonna pour this in very slowly. I measured out between 5 and 6 ounces here. I'm look and make sure that's not leaking as that goes in. Looks like it's going pretty good. Because if I leak, which I am actually, it is leaking a little bit. I need to get that funnel to fit on there a little better. I thought I had one with a smaller end on it that would fit in that hole nice, but I don't. So I'm going to play with that. Anyways, pour in your 4 ounces. When you're done with that, I want to look at my measurement and see how much I've poured in there and how much may have spilled. Then put that back on and that drain plug. I'm going to look and see if it says what the torque setting is on that. We'll get to that in a second. Let me pop the camera off here for a second. And another thing you could do is, if you happen to have like a turkey baster or syringe or something with a smaller tip on it, you can put it in there, you know, gently with that. Pre-measure it and then just suck it up and put it in. And then put your cap back on. Doesn't actually specify for the fill plug on the front, but 14 foot-pounds for the bottom. So a couple of things you might have picked up also, other than what I've talked about, but just from watching. You know, make sure you got proper funnels so you don't make a big mess. Very important on that front because you got to put in, you know, 4 ounces. And like I said, the shop said 4 to 6. Make sure you find out what that is specifically for your machine, because I'm just talking about my 1999 Sportsman 500 that it takes 4, and the shop said 4 to 6. So then just to go over these again, you know, you got angle drive, that's for the front end. Demand drive is for your hubs, and again, I made a video on that a long time ago talking about that. And I just use automatic transmission fluid, synthetic, you know, I think it's ATF 4 plus or ATF plus, I forget, but synthetic automatic transmission fluid, and that's really all that is. And the guy at the shop kind of agreed that not a big deal. And then the AGL for the back end, or the transmission, that's full synthetic. And so it says here in the book for the front gear case to either use the appropriate, you know, Polaris gear lube or API GL5 80 to 90 gear lube. But again, check for the specifications for your particular model. You know, that's just what I'm looking at for this particular model. And then again, the demand drive fluid is for your hubs, which I made a video on that a long time ago. Check that out if you want, and all the other ones too. And the back, the gear case lube / transmission fluid, they don't give an alternative for that. But, you know, you can probably do a little research if you want and check it out. Personally, you know, when I'm doing this, the fluids are a bit expensive, but I know it's the right stuff. You know, I've spent a lot of time over the years trying to cross-reference a lot of things, and the things that I do without any problem, or known problems anyways. But when it comes to the lubricants, I tend to stick with what they recommend. You know, there are products out there that are comparable, of course, and if you're out of warranty and you do a lot of your own work and stuff, you know, whatever you're comfortable with. I'm not trying to push their product by any means. I'm just letting you know that that's what I do, you know, if you're wondering. So, and it's not out of loyalty or anything like that. It's just it's like, well, it's one thing I know I'm not messing with, and it's what they recommend. And it's a couple bucks more, but I have the peace of mind knowing that I didn't put the wrong thing in there and cause some issues. So, because I'm not what's the word? A viscologist? I don't know. I'm not a lubologist. I don't know all the ins and outs. You know, I know obviously my motor oils. You know, you got your standard weights and what's recommended, and
then you have your brand preferences. But when it starts getting into the gear case lube and the transmission fluid and the hub fluid I've consistently used ATF4 plus, or automatic transmission fluid synthetic, and had no issues with that. And I've mentioned it to a couple of guys that work on these for a living, and they acknowledge that and say they do and have, and shouldn't be a problem. But the other ones, the angle drive and the transmission fluid, in fact, the only reason I bought the demand drive fluid this time was because I was at a dealership buying other stuff. I was out of automatic transmission fluid, and I said, I'll just grab a bottle. And the price was, I think, a little bit more, but not enough to make it worth running somewhere else to get the other stuff. So anyways, hopefully that's helpful. Like I said, there's a bunch of other videos. You can check those out. And if you have any questions, by all means, comments, anything to add, it's all helpful to other people that are watching. And of course, we'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.